My name is Matthew. So I've been a part of several small groups over the decade or more, a couple decades actually, and even led a couple. And what I would say is that the really great thing that I've noticed about small groups is the transformation that happens. You can't get any other way. And what I found is that in our current small group, it's very gratifying to be able to kind of open up and share and be like, so does your kid use the carpet as an outhouse too? Like, I'm not the only one? Like you can kind of relate on a different level. And so, but then the other piece of it too is that small groups, it's growing up, I grew up in the Lutheran church. And so any of the Protestant churches, and I've attended a lot, it's really, really easy to actually sit in the back row or the middle row or the front row and just be a number in the crowd and just kind of blend in. You come and go, don't have to get involved. And not saying it's not good, but there's definitely limited transformation there. And what I found is that there's a work that takes place in the hearts of people that is pretty amazing. And my wife and I got to experience that firsthand. Several years back, we were leading a small group, happened to be over finances, and we actually happened to teach a class called Financial Peace University. Some of you know about Dave Ramsey and that kind of thing. And so all well and good, but we taught the class, finished it up, and then kind of prayed about it some more and decided that, there were still some other members that would like to go through it that didn't get to. And so we taught it again. And so that was a lot of work. It's 13 weeks, and then now it's 9 weeks. But at the end of it, we had a couple come up to us, and we didn't know very well. And they basically had said, if we hadn't taken this class, we would have been bankrupt in 6 months and divorced in 18. And I was like, wow, like that never would have happened, like had we not actually had like a small group to come together and actually grow together and share with one another. Like, that's powerful. And so even now I get like choked up over it because that's the life. I mean, when you think about it, like, that's God's story he's writing, and man, that story is so much sweeter than anything else out there. So I was asked to share because we're in a current small group right now for toddlers, and thank goodness, because getting anywhere on time with toddlers is impossible, and so it's been a joy to be a part of this current small group because I seriously couldn't imagine the growth that's already happened in our hearts and stuff. So, but that's my experience. And if you're not plugged in, so the reality is they're fun and they're good, and there's pies to be shared and dinners to be shared and laughter to be shared. But there's growth, so much growth that you're missing out on if you're not plugged in. So, I recommend checking it out because the story is so much sweeter. So,
Thank you. Well, I won't be mad about that, but Matt has taken a lot of things I was planning to say. Thank you so much for sharing. I could stop right here, but I will not. And I would like us to go back to this other small group of disciples that found themselves in a boat in a difficult situation. Let's open our Bible in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, verse 22 to 36. Let's listen to the word of God. Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side, while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up on the mountainside by himself to pray. Later that night, he was there alone, and the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them, walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake. They were terrified. "It's a ghost," they said. And they cried out in fear. But Jesus immediately said to them, "Take courage, it is I. Don't be afraid." "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come to you on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why did you doubt?" And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God." When they had crossed over, they landed in Gennesaret. And when the men of that place recognized Jesus, they sent word to all the surrounding country. People brought all their sick to him and begged him to let the sick just touch the edge of his cloak. And all who touched it were healed. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. That's a story that we often know well. And we tend to focus a lot on Peter and this moment where he got scared and started sinking in the water. And I think it's good to keep in mind the two things that he did really well. First, all the disciples got very scared, including him. They were terrified. It was still night. It was before dawn. And this, something supernatural that they could not explain was happening. But Peter was able to overcome his fear. He was able to recognize Jesus. And he considered going out of the boat. And you know, if you are in a boat in the middle of a lake, this boat is not only, let's say, your comfort zone, it's also the only place where you can stay alive. So that was really a bold move. And the second thing, very important, that Peter did was to ask Jesus first to invite him, to tell him to come. We know that Peter was this spontaneous guy, very bold, very fast to talk. But here, he had the wisdom, the maturity of faith to ask first to Jesus to tell him what to do and to tell him to come. And we must not forget that he actually walked on water, even though it didn't last that long. He's the only one person we read of in the Bible, apart from Jesus, who walked on the water. That's not a small thing. When we consider getting into a small group, sometimes it can feel a little like jumping out of a boat. It can be a little unsettling, especially if you are kind of new in a church that is new, you don't know yet very well. There is so many people you don't know, and they seem to know each other very well. It can be, it's easy to feel a little lost. And, you know, as a staff person myself, when I started working here, and I had always been in small churches, I felt in the middle of this friendly ocean of people I didn't know yet. So, asking of new people, and not that new people, to join small group can be like another intimidating thing to tell them to do. So why do we badger everyone to get into small group? And when I say badger, I mean politely suggest that everyone go into small group. The first thing is that in small group, you get into relationship. And that's what Matt was saying so beautifully. That's where you get to know people really well. And that makes a big difference. I was talking with Kate Davis, our director of communication. You know, we have this newsletter for small groups that comes every other month. And I was asking for her experience for this newsletter. And she said, you know, that makes such a big difference. She's part of a small group. It made such a big difference to be sitting next to people that you know well, who care for you, instead of people that are friendly and smile to you, but you don't know them. That makes a big difference. And there is a reason why study after study show that people who have a good network of people who care about them are actually in better health than people who don't. And as an author says, you can live without a community around you, but not well. So that matters. And in the same time, when you are in those small groups and create those relationships, indeed, you have this life that you spend together, and you become brothers and sisters, which is great. And in the same time, sometimes it can be a little tricky. You get to know each other. There is time where there is hurt feelings. And if we just look back at the very first two brothers in the Bible, we see how those two really had issues. Yeah, that's putting it mildly. And, you know, if you certainly have in mind, you know, the heartbreaking verse when God asked to Cain where Abel is, and Cain just killed him. There is a heartbreaking verse when Cain replied, I don't know where he is. Am I my brother's keeper? And you know, this is a very important verse. Because indeed, Cain is not his brother's keeper. Cain is his brother's brother. And we all are not each other's keepers. It's a keeper, it's a job, it's an occupation. We are each other's brothers and sisters. Those are deep relationships that grow on a soil that is rich, that transform us, that is challenging sometimes, but still, it makes us grow. And indeed, there is this story about getting out of our comfort zone here. I'm going to share something personal. As a child, as I was growing up, I was a depressed child. I went through time where I was very, very sad, and I didn't know why. And all my life, I've battled really a deep anxiety. And it has taken me a long time and lots of therapy to move on and to be at a place where I am now, feeling comfortable. And so when I hear people around me say, yes, let's get out of our comfort zone, I'm like, I just got here. You want me to do what? And you know, I don't think it is as much getting out of our comfort zone as it is growing our comfort zone, growing the space where we are able to move and to act and to have new experiences and feel comfortable doing those things that scared us before. We grow our comfort zone. So indeed, there is a time where it is challenging and scary, but eventually it feels really good. You know what happens when we don't grow? We stagnate. And that happens a lot in churches. There is studies that show that 6 to 8 people out of 10 stagnate at a time or another, and sometimes for a very, very long time. And one of the reasons why it is difficult to react against it is that it creeps on you and you don't notice it. I'm pretty sure that no one will ever say, I think I'm going to stagnate for the next 18 months. You don't mean it. It just happens, and often it happens because we are so busy. We have so many things in our lives that requires energy, attention, that we put our all into it, that we become people who just we are in worship, but we checked out. We don't want to get involved because we feel already overwhelmed. And so our spiritual life becomes not this life that is so, makes us feel so alive. It becomes like a routine. And being in a small group really helps with that. Because we are in the midst of those people that we love and we learn and we do new things. And we avoid to stagnate. And you know what happens when you don't stagnate? You grow. And there is something amazing about growth. There is this author, her name is Gretchen Rubin, and she's not a church author or she's a secular author. She has been writing about happiness. And she wrote those books such as Happier at Home, I think, and who made New York bestseller list. And so she worked on happiness. And to her own surprise, she said that there was one factor that she found that was connected with happiness. And she was not expecting that factor to be that important. And she said, when people are in an atmosphere of growth, that's a huge engine to happiness. When we grow, we feel elated. We feel happy. And this author, who was working on happiness, bumped into that. When we grow, we become the salt and the light. And you remember what Pastor Aaron said a couple of weeks ago. He said, we cannot be the salt of the earth if we don't know the salt. We cannot be the light of the world if we don't know the light. And when we are in a small group, we become more salty. We become brighter light because we learn and because we get transformed. And that makes a big difference. And there is days where one day a small group will be in a boat in the middle of a lake, and there will be Jesus appearing. But it will turn very different from what we read in the Bible, because this small group is cohesive. So they will all ask Jesus to invite them out. And they will be, when you walk on water, I've not done it myself, but I've heard it's crazy. It's hard to stay focused on Jesus. But when there are several of you, and they notice that one of them start being focused, they can shake him and say, stay focused. Don't get distracted by the waves or the wind. And that makes a big difference. And they grow and they walk on water. This is the love that people see. Those small groups who learn, who get transformed. And Henry Nouwen, the author of so many beautiful books, describes a mosaic and the beauty of each stone. And each stone is different, he says, and has a different story. And he writes, each of us is like a little stone, but together we reveal the face of God to the world. Nobody can say, I make God visible. But others who sees us together can say, they make God visible. And that's the reality of small groups. We make God visible. Amen.